Hello, hello.
Hello.
Hey there, you sound great.
Thank you. I feel great.
I'm happy to hear that. Hold on. Let me get your cam up. 1 second. This is going to take me a hot second. While I'm
No
doing
worries.
that, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. So for those of you who know me, I'm Mike Vick, the dog fight ring guy.
No, don't,
No.
they're gonna take. They don't know irony. You have to help them. Help them to the truth.
So, I commented earlier that I'd never heard that joke before, so I really appreciate somebody bringing it up. Yeah, I've heard every version of that joke. I guess I always tell folks that, I'm not a big fan of football, don't play it very well, and I love dogs. So I have several photos of myself lovingly petting dogs from when I was a little baby on up to very recently. So they're locked and loaded anytime someone brings up that joke. So it actually hasn't happened as much as I thought it would. But yes, my name is Mike Vick. No, not that Mike Vick. I am running for state rep in Indiana's 29th district, which comprises most of Noblesville, Indiana, which is northeast of Indianapolis. And parts of Fishers, the little part of Fishers, Indiana, that was put into this district, I think was gerrymandered in because it's mostly Democratic. And a lot of the rest of it, at least as far as past elections, has been Republican. And then there's some rural areas that are northeast of Noblesville, Indiana, that are included in the district as well.
Gotcha.
So at the moment, the candidate who is the incumbent has only been in there for one term. His name is Chuck Goodrich. He's a rather wealthy man. I am not. I'm a working class guy. And up to this point, had never run for office. But I have done a lot of professional political work. I worked for the Indiana Democratic Party in 2018. Right now, I am the field canvass director for Citizens Action Coalition, which is a nonpartisan, not-for-profit consumer advocacy group. It's the largest such group in the state of Indiana. We focus primarily on utility policy and energy policy. I always like to make sure folks know that just like the tweets that say my employer's views are not necessarily my own, they are nonpartisan. I deeply respect that. We had a long conversation before I ran for office, wherein I sort of tried to lay out boundaries there that I would make sure that nobody thought that I was running as CAC's candidate. But in any event, that's what I do right now. Obviously, we don't have a field canvass right now because of COVID. So I've been making calls from home for them. But we, again, primarily focus on utility policy, making sure folks don't get gouged by their electric companies, which happens quite a bit. We have stopped $4 billion in unnecessary rate hikes in the 40 years that CAC has been around. We continue to do that work. We're also focused on making sure that folks are moving toward 100% green renewable energy in the state, which is certainly something that I am very much keen on doing myself. So before that, I worked for Greenpeace. Before that, I worked for Working America, which is AFL-CIO community affiliate. And before that, I worked for SEIU, twice actually for SEIU. I did work trying to get home care and child care workers organized in the union. And I also worked here in Indiana trying to boost turnout for the Democratic gubernatorial candidate in 2016, John Gregg. And then before that, for 10 years, I was a journalist.
I would say that with all of that together, you've probably made up for the dog thing, honestly.
Well, I've been trying.
It sounds like you've been compensating hard for the.
I have. It wasn't a big deal until I was in high school, and he was a famous football player, and then he went from famous to infamous. And now, I get people that don't know where they know my name from, who don't really follow sports, but they know my name from somewhere. And so, I always get some version of the joke. I've heard pretty much every version of it. Up until recently, I had a really new version of the joke that I thought was actually kind of funny. I had posted pro Socialist Rifle Association post on Twitter, and someone asked if I was even allowed to own a gun because of the dogfighting thing. So that was a new version. I'd
I
never
am
heard that one.
no, I can understand. I know, because I knew a person whose birthday was 9/11. And
That's horrible. Yeah.
right, I remember very distinctly on September 11th, 2002. I would have been in like second grade or something like that. I remember their very marked disappointment, just generally speaking, at how the tone of their birthday had turned. Um, yeah, well, I mean, altogether, that's a pretty phenomenal resume for politics, I would say. What initially got you interested in uh, doing on the ground work like that? I know that you have a bachelor's in political science, but where did you? Because a lot of people who get into political science, they like it in a very abstract way, sort of in a distanced perspective. But you've been very hands on. What got you into that?
Well, I feel like I've been preparing for it my whole life. My dad was a union iron worker and a rabble-rousing one at that. He, participated in strikes and union votes and all of that. So when I was growing up in our county, he was the county Democratic Party chair. He kind of came into that. In a crashing the party kind of a way. The party where we were actually, I was born in California. I grew up in very far northern end of California in a place called Del Norte County, which is mostly redwoods. There, my dad used to say it was behind the redwood curtain.
Mhm.
And so there's a lot of very conservative Democrats up there, much more so than in other parts of California. And he was, we were coming from the San Francisco Bay Area, and he was not interested in towing the conservative Democratic Party line there. And so he got a bunch of his friends together and went and took over the party. And so, for a time there, he was the chair of the party in the county, and then later became the chair of the district for the state party. And so he ran congressional races when I was a teenager. When I was a little kid, we had Congress people staying at our house. So it was always a thing where you would talk about politics. I was a student delegate in 1996 to the California Democratic Party convention. And my sister and I were in the cheap seats. It was a lot easier to see Bill Clinton, who was there at the time and actually stayed in the hotel that we stayed at. A lot easier to see him on the Jumbotron than actually see him in real life. But we were there. And so, I just always remember politics being a big part of my life. And people often, the saying goes that you don't talk about politics or religion at the dinner table, and my thought was always, what am I supposed to talk about? Those are the only two things that I really care a lot
True.
about. So yeah.
Yeah, I grew up pretty politically not involved, but pretty, I guess, engaged, or at least aware, because my family is fairly left leaning and fairly active in expressing that. But with regards to your upbringing, how do you feel then? I guess I know what your answer is going to be, but I'm interested in your thoughts on it. How do you feel then about the absolute death of unions in this country?
Well, I'm obviously deeply concerned about it, and I think that the material conditions on the ground are sort of creating a resurgence of unions and union talk. People talking even about a general strike
Mhm.
right now, which I think is a good thing. I think there's a lot of people that don't really understand how to make one of those happen, and have been clued in by union folks that, hey, you need to start talking to us because we know how to make this happen. And so wildcat strikes are on the rise. Teachers being pushed to the brink. So I think that there's movement in that front. But the reality is, the Democratic Party had a big role in helping to kill unions.
Oh, for sure.
And it was done in part because at least in the 60s and 70s, there were a lot of unions that weren't super keen on the idea of let's not go to Vietnam, and a lot of union leadership, particularly, were pro-Vietnam War, and so the party was not was moving away from being in favor of that war, even though they initially were very much in favor of it. And so part of pushing unions out of the decision-making process in that particular instance was just pushing them out of the process of nominating the Democratic Party candidates and pushing them out, other than the sort of lip service that's paid to union issues in the Democratic Party still to this day, being in favor of things like card check or what have you, not really doing anything about it though. But it goes back even further than that, of pushing socialists out of the leadership positions. So consequently, you're going to end up with less militant unions.
Right.
And so if you've got unions being sort of siloed into their different industrial areas versus the old solidarity between unions and the solidarity that unions would have with workers that weren't union workers, this thing, particularly since Medicare for All has been pushed so much, is trying to pit unions against non-union workers who want medical care. I think that one of the ways that we can sort of circumvent this is by going in a more radical direction with organizing, which is to have the union run a shop, and that's essentially the workplace democracy, worker-owned co-op, cooperative enterprise model. So you don't have the union boss dichotomy, fighting against each other thing. You have unions actually
right.
participating
You resolve
in the
the contradiction. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's what a lot of people don't talk about as well. Even so, the unions, for the unions that remain in this country, the majority of them are public sector as well, which means invariably that, at least for those people, and we don't talk about this, is the weakness of the existing unions and how they've become this dry, cut by numbers, sort of a contractual obligation to ensure that, hey, if you want to work as a grocery bagger, you have to do this, and you get $1.25 higher than minimum wage. And the union boss is essentially just a second boss who is slightly more amicable to you and has a different set of contractual obligations to you. But the actual inter-union connectivity, the revolutionary or at least radical elements of that part of the dual power structure are just fucking gone. They're not around anymore. And that's one of the reasons why I think that lefties need to be significantly more concerned with electoral politics, at least to the extent that we can get unions back afloat. Whether it be repealing Taft-Hartley or just any number of other legislations that we could possibly implement, that is like a necessary prerequisite for us even being able to engage in direct action, it seems, because there's no longer a way for the average Joe to come into contact with, for their own benefit, a socialist or a person at least repping socialist values.
Right. Well, I think that this is one of the ways in which we really need to be focused not just on electoral politics, but on union politics, organizing more so, unions actually resurgent, and making sure that we're doing that. My dad used to push back a little on the idea of the union boss, because he called himself a union boss. I mean, the idea of the union is that you as a worker are the boss, that you as the worker are voting for your leadership, and that theoretically at least you can remove that leadership by democratic vote. And so that's not how real world unions actually work all the time, but it's how they ought to work, and it's how we should be structuring unions in a more radically egalitarian, radically socialist way. And so, I'm particularly hardened by the resurgence of unions like the IWW, which is, certainly in that vein.
Right, they've seen a pretty big resurgence over the past 5 years, right?
Yeah, and again, this is the concept of the one big union, of having organizing all the workers into one union, and then you organize everyone into a union, and then you call a general strike because you're all part of the same union, and so any strike becomes a general strike, and we know from history that if you can organize a general strike, you can get pretty much anything you want. Because you're hitting the capitalist class right in their pocketbook, and the longer a general strike lasts, the more pressure builds on the capitalist class to capitulate to whatever the demands are of that general strike. So I'm four square behind general strike, and again, this is one of the ways in which I don't think. Obviously, as someone who's running for office, I don't think we should ever abandon electoral politics. I think that's a stupid idea. I understand the reasoning behind folks who push back on electoral politics, but I would just point out that there was a socialist movement in another country that actually had a real revolution, the Bolsheviks, and whatever you think about the Bolsheviks, they ran people in elections, and they got their ideas out there in that way. So you don't even really have to win the election per se. Obviously, it's great if you're able to.
It's not. It's nice. It's a nice bonus. Yeah.
Of course. But spreading the ideas alone, the ability to spread the ideas is granted to you by running for office. I think that's an important thing in and of itself. And organizing works. Doesn't always happen right away. Doesn't always work right away in that first cycle. There's example after example of folks. For example, Bernie Sanders, ran multiple times before he won by 10 votes for Burlington mayor, and didn't win his first time running for Congress either. I think it's important for folks to remember that the organizing part that you can do in an election by virtue of being a candidate is a good thing. But there is a truth to the idea that, as Zen says, voting is, marginally useful, but it's no replacement for democracy, which requires that direct action by informed citizens. So of course, yeah. One of those direct actions is a strike, and I think it's an incredibly powerful quiver in our arsenal.
Well, yeah, that's one of our big issues right now, is that our quiver has been getting lighter and lighter with time as well. Because with the general strike, and I think right now people are speaking of a general strike. I'll admit I'm a little bit pessimistic on the prospect with how poor the union situation is in this country. I don't know how well such a thing would be able to be organized, but I guess we'll see. But that aside, it seems like right now the only big avenue for legitimacy and for propagandizing is either A, you run for office, and Bernie Sanders has done phenomenal work radicalizing people, in his own respect, or B, alternatively, you just do it through highly decentralized, like the internet, like you do this stuff through YouTube or Twitch or through any of the through any of the astroturfed online people like Ben Shapiro, for example. And it seems like those are really the only two mechanisms people have for getting people to change their political views anymore, because the unions are dead. People don't have workplace conversations about politics anymore. If you're working at an office and you make eye contact with another coworker for more than 3 seconds, a boss comes by and tells you to get back to work. There's no avenue for people to connect with each other there. So we're limited massively, and it's stifling,
It's almost like it's by design.
Yeah, it's almost as though, get me if you can, there is a separate group of people with a separate set of interests who have a lot of control, who are, as a matter of fact, trying to keep us from talking about our wages, and well,
Yeah,
not
yeah.
our, including me, as a part of the privileged YouTube bourgeois. I am a class traitor, of course, but the average worker, obviously.
Well, and actually, in many workplaces, I remember this from the contract I signed, I believe, when I was working in TV news. You're not really even supposed to talk about someone else's wages, like or mention your own wages. So it's, and even if not, it's sort of a taboo. You don't talk about what other people make, right? There's certainly a benefit of that to the capitalist class. That's actually one of the reasons why I got in this race in the first place, which is that here in Indiana's 29th district, and Hamilton County generally, it's the most expensive county to live in the state. And I talked to even some Democrats who are better off here economically in the state, and they're like, they act like there's not a big deal with that. Like, why would you number one, I've had people say, why would you want to live anywhere else in Indiana, which is a ridiculous statement. I've been all over the state. There's a lot of fine places to live here in the state, but Hamilton County is expensive because it's a white flight area. And the people in Indianapolis and elsewhere who first settled here, or settled here and grew it to what it is now, did so explicitly because they were escaping Indianapolis because there were too many black people there. So the housing prices here are ridiculous. The cost of living here is ridiculous, and most regular people struggle to do it. Mm-hmm. I struggle to do it, being a working class person myself. So it's tough, and I spent some time with one of the women who goes to my church, runs a group called Prevail. They help with women and men and children who are in domestic violence situations. And this is one of the ways that I try to open people's eyes about the idea of the cost of living, the problems with such a high cost of living, because they don't think about this per se unless they're in the situation. But a woman who is being abused by her husband or boyfriend, whatever that relationship happens to be, is obviously less likely to leave that relationship if she is completely dependent upon that man for living in the place where they're living. Mm-hmm. And if a single woman can't survive and take care of her children without having the male breadwinner at home, it becomes this very deadly, potentially, situation for her to leave or to stay. And so you're caught between a rock and a hard place. And it's a very similar situation right now for many of us because of COVID. Folks are out of work. Unemployment enhanced benefits have gone away. Mm-hmm. And so folks are already struggling, and they get kicked while they're down by a pandemic that we're not properly dealing with. And they're told that they have to go back to work as soon as possible in order to get the economy moving again. And they want to go back to work because they're behind on their rent, they're behind on their utility payments, and the eviction moratorium is gone. And so instead of changing the way that our economy works, the way that our society works, we try to change the way that we're dealing with a disease. So that we're not listening to scientists who are telling us we need to deal with this disease in this way, because dealing with it in that way would tank our economy, because our economy is structured around exploitation. So
I think
situation.
I think it's pretty clear at this point that we have committed to having absolutely no plan for COVID. I think I'm pretty sure that at this point we have completely it's been what, 6 months, we've gotten $1,200. We are absolutely committed to doing nothing about this. And I guess in that respect, I respect the Trump administration's commitment to the politics of sociopathy. No wiffle waffling there. 1,200, just enough. He got his name on the checks, sent them out. That probably moves some people right, because people are very impressionable in times of crisis. And yeah, that's all he had to do. And now he just keeps his hand off the situation. With regards to the abuse angle, I agree. And it's something that that's always bothered me, because I know people who have been in this situation who
Sure.
because having like a household situation where the man makes significantly more money, or all the money, is essentially the economic equivalent of a one household vote, or like a one vote per household situation, where we're like in a completely neutral, apolitical vacuum. Sure, it's one vote per household, and sure, the money goes to the household. But in reality, what this invariably does is permit the exploitation of women, just in terms of its practical consequence.
Well, the same thing happens in workplaces, though, as well, and this is the basis in large part of what's been uncovered and really was an open secret for everyone with the Me Too movement, which is that the reason why men are able to get away with this for so long is because they hold the economic power. They hold that political power because they hold economic power. They hold all the power at the workplace, and so they're able to leverage that power in order to get control over women sexually or otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, for sure. With regards to COVID-19, what about you? Do you think America is going to keep stumbling forward? Waves of people die, we go back to work, we come back from work. Do you think we're just going to ride out the wave until invariably either it gets burnt through, or we get a vaccine? Or do you think that inevitably we're going to have to do something about it?
Well, I thought inevitably we were going to have to re-up the benefits, but apparently, as long as you are insulated from that as a rich person in Congress, you don't feel like you have to deal with it.
September 8th, they're reconvening. Yeah. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I went down actually. So this is 2 times now. I went physically to the home of my Congresswoman Susan Brooks, who is retiring. As part of the people stimulus demands, and presented the same demands to one of my 2 senators, Mike Braun, who, when I was working for the Indiana Democratic Party, I had the privilege of being the tracker for Mike, and I followed him around. I mentioned to him on Twitter that I would do so for free because he thinks that we need to take a little bit of risk and send our kids back into schools during the midst of a pandemic. And I have 2 kids, and that hit home for me. Even if I didn't, it should hit home for anyone to sacrifice our kids at the altar of this. I think that in answer to your question, the problem is that the political will to do anything is really confined to people like us who, unless we band together by the millions, don't actually have power. I think that's what it's going to take, is massive demonstrations of that organizing and of that power in order to get something to happen. And we've seen this growing because of the material conditions. Folks have been out protesting, not just obviously because of Black Lives Matter. That's incredibly important and inextricably linked, because obviously people of color are dying disproportionately in this pandemic. But people are up in arms over the economic impact as well. You just wouldn't know it to hear most Congress people talk, or to hear most of the talking heads on the mainstream media speaking about this issue. So I think, unfortunately, until and unless we see more massive demonstrations by folks at the bottom who really are being affected by this, until it gets bad enough where, say, we have that that eviction crisis, that potential eviction crisis turns into an actual eviction wave, and people get put out on the street and therefore have the willingness and the desire to go out and petition the government for a redress of that grievance by the millions. Until that happens, I think there isn't going to be the political will to do anything about it, because in order to do anything about it, you're going to have to take money from people who have money. Yeah. And the people who have money don't want to give up that money.
And the less money that we have, the less grassroots organizing is viable.
Right. And it goes beyond this, which is that they've not only not done anything for the people, they have actively hurt the people and actively used this pandemic situation in order to consolidate their power. There's been a consolidation among large businesses that are already doing well, buying up the small businesses that are doing so poorly because they have no customers.
Yeah. The only way, like you said earlier, and this is because this is always like the nuclear option we have. A general strike is the only. There is absolutely no change in the state of affairs, save for the total automation of the economy, which we're nowhere near. Where a general strike does not bring the country to its knees near immediately.
Right.
Yeah, it's a more total version of the shutdown that everyone is freaking out over. And what I'm hoping, and this is the reason why I guess I hope for a Biden presidency, not so much for the harm reduction elements of it, because I'm sure he'll be, less racist, or maybe there will be like less Nazis on the campaign staff. What I'm really hoping is that when Biden fails, and he will fail, there's no way he's going to really address the problems in this country. What I'm hoping is there are loud voices who are able to pull all these disaffected liberals over. Because unfortunately, and you said it, we kind of need those disaffected liberals right now. I'm pretty sure if we took every single anti-capitalist in this country and fit them all together, we could probably fit, in a convention hall, maybe a couple of convention halls. And then you have, of course, like social democrats would be a much, much larger block, like, Nordic model or like social democracy inspired by Bernie Sanders types. And then you have like the liberals, the tens of millions of them. And I genuinely hope, because I don't know if we can wait for a president for November 3rd for us to begin moving again, that the lack of proper government response to the COVID-19 crisis, that the upcoming eviction crisis, that the people who are evicted, the people who past a certain point will have literally nothing to lose, that these people will recognize that they are not an entirely distinct movement to the BLM movement, that there are very strong shared elements of common economic crisis there, and that in that respect, both of them will be pulled leftward. A class element will be introduced to the BLM movement more than it already has, and the BLM movement will be sort of a reciprocal guide towards a more radical set of policies, at least for some liberals. Not all of them, but even a fraction of the total libs who support BLM would be a huge bolster to the socialist movement in this country.
Well, I think this is always the problem, is that in order for there to be mass movements like this, you tend to have things go really wrong for a while. And so in this way, it's not like COVID created the problems. It just exacerbated the problem that already existed, and made it more readily visible to people who it wasn't readily visible to. And so when you have more people who are struggling, you have more opportunity for people to become radicalized by the material conditions that are on the ground. The problem that I see with the potential for a Biden presidency is that the same people that we need to become radicalized can potentially go to sleep. And just like they did in the Obama administration, and just like these folks out protesting, protesting with signs that say, I would rather be at brunch, or if Hillary were elected, I'd be at brunch. This is the problem, is that the liberal professional class doesn't really care about these issues because it doesn't affect them personally. And so they pay lip service to it. And if there is a liberal in power, then they'll just assume, well, all these problems are going to get taken care of by Joe Biden. And they won't. They won't be taken care of. The material conditions on the ground will not be taken care of. The same conditions that brought us Trump will continue. And what will we have to stand against that in 2024? Kamala Harris? I don't know. So I'm.
You don't think you don't think Kamala Harris is going to arrest income inequality?
She knows a predator when she sees one. Apparently, she's okay with being the VP for one. I don't know what that's about. But I don't. I think one of the things that I said very recently, I'm not voting for Joe Biden. We don't necessarily talk about that. I know that you've had your experience.
I'm a pretty active advocate for voting for him. Yeah,
I know you are. So I'm not voting for him. But I will say I understand the reasons behind folks that are. The thing that I want to focus on right now is that. I don't want Joe Biden to fail. I want to see Donald Trump out of office. I want Joe Biden to become more humane and that for his policies to be more likely to defeat not just Donald Trump, but Trumpism. And his steadfast refusal to do so not only endangers the ability for his campaign to succeed in November, and we've seen an erosion of the polls in his favor, but it also, again, makes it much more likely that he will fail, and the next Trump who comes along could very well be a lot more politically savvy than the Trump that we have right now.
That's the logic that I used to follow. I think my main issue with that is that right now, or in this past presidential election 2020, Bernie Sanders' support actually dropped between here and 2016. If you take a look at like the total proportions of votes that went to him versus, and I think the reason for that is because liberals are so stupefied by the presence of a Trump presidency that they're willing to attribute the problems with the system to him rather than to the system broadly. We have to remember Bernie Sanders rose to prominence after 8 years of relatively stable Obama. And he was at his height there, whereas now it's like 58% of the people who voted for Biden in the primaries did so because Biden was the electable candidate. While I obviously disagree with that assessment, it shows that fear is what's driving their movement towards moderation. And that in the absence of that fear, it's possible they would be more willing to move left. I think that if liberals continue to see the problems with this country under a Republican presidency, and under Trump specifically, they will think it a problem of Republicanism and of Trumpism, rather than sort of something that the Democrat Party is also incapable of meaningfully addressing. But I recognize, of course, that if we get into the heyday of a Bernie or bust argument, that it will probably consume the remainder of the time we have. So,
I'm honestly, my thing about it is I want to let people vote for the candidate that they most adhere to the values of that candidate. So I've got a lot of people in my district for whom that person is Joe Biden. So by all means, if that's the person that you want to vote for him. In Indiana, unless there's some crazy shakeup in the electorate in 2020, this will very likely be a Trump state. So my vote for Joe Biden is as effective regarding the Electoral College as my vote for Mickey Mouse. So when I go into the ballot booth, I would rather vote for a candidate that most closely resembles my values. Now, if we had a popular vote election, that would be another thing entirely. If we had, something like, doing away with plurality voting, and I could actually vote for a candidate and score each candidate on my ballot or something like that, that would be a different matter entirely. Even in a state where it's a swing state, you can use something like Vote Pact, where you find a conservative in your same state who is in a similar boat to you. They don't like Donald Trump. They also don't like Joe Biden, but they feel like they need to vote for Donald Trump because they hate Joe Biden. They don't want to see Joe Biden win. You can tell them, hey, I'm in a similar situation. I want to vote for an independent candidate. If you also vote for an independent candidate, then we have canceled the spoiler effect for our two voters there in that situation, and we can vote for an independent candidate of our choice without a spoiler effect. The reality is, the real problem of the spoiler effect is not the spoiler effect itself, which is usually negligible. The problem is the fear of the spoiler effect. Mm-hmm. And that's why neither party wants to do anything about the spoiler effect. If Ralph Nader were really the problem in the year 2000, which he was not anywhere near the real reason why Al Gore lost that race. But if Democrats actually believed that, then why wouldn't they have spent the last 20 years lobbying to get rid of plurality voting? It's because plurality voting helps them.
Well, Democrats don't actually give a fuck about winning, of course. I think every Democrat secretly prays for a loss so they can go back to complaining and not doing anything. And funnily enough, for the Ralph Nader election, I'm pretty sure the Libertarians actually got a comparable amount of votes at that time. So if we consolidated all aligned voting, I think that only would have cemented the Republican position at that time.
It would have, and nobody ever talks about the Libertarian Party, voters who 2-to-1 choose a Republican, and Green Party voters actually aren't otherwise Democratic voters. They're generally otherwise non-voters. So you hold a gun to their head and they hesitate and maybe take the bullet rather than picking the Democrat or the Republican.
Oh, I mean, I love it when the Republicans make that mistake, though. When they vote libertarian, I love libertarian voters. They're fantastic. I encourage, please, if your issue with Trump is that he hasn't gone far enough deregulating businesses, vote for your heart. Vote Republican. Yeah. Make it easier for Sleepy Joe to get in. But for the Green voters, I have to go harder, of course, because I'll absolutely weaponize that. I recently saw. Wait. Very brief departure. I think we can for comedic value. I argue with Nazis online. Recently, there was a Nazi guy called Mike Enoch who made his own party. I think it's called the National Justice Party or something like that. And this guy has a lot of influence in the online neo-Nazi community. I mean, he actually has a fair amount of pull. And he did this whole 40-minute speech where he talks about the Jewification of America as, destroying the white. No, it's like full Nazi stuff, And I'm watching this and I think, God bless him. A couple thousand less Trump voters, you sink as much money as you want into that campaign, okay? You can't go as far with it as you want. And no doubt all of them will be arrested for something or another, domestic abuse.
Well, I mean, they could do that, or they could just become cops.
Yeah. Fuck, that was going to be my other segment today, actually. There was a article written in The Guardian by a former FBI agent, like yesterday, about the infiltration of the cops by white supremacists. Not that they haven't been talking about that for 20 years, but, don't encourage them.
Well, I no encouragement necessary. That it's a self-selection kind of a thing. I have obviously stuck my neck out here in Indiana and been in favor of defund the police and been in favor of that as the first step on a long road toward, maybe not so long road toward abolish the police. I am a libertarian socialist after all, so I don't really think that the Democratic Party here knew what they were getting into when they encouraged me to run. I worked for them. Some of them knew how left I was, but not all of them did. I think that my thing here in this election has always been twofold. I do think that we have a path to win, and we need obviously more volunteers, more folks to head to our website and give what they can to the cause. But the goal is not just to win this election; it's to organize folks for the future. And I've been
like
willing
IWW membership, which we
absolutely
really need. I think IWW membership was like 500 20 years ago, and now we're up to 5,000, which is still 1% of what it would need to be before it could even come close to organizing general action. But it's getting there, right? Actually, how much of the how large do you think the IWW would need to be before it could start to meaningfully affect policy? Or
well,
mobilize?
I think honestly, tens of thousands of people with the right mindset could do that. With certainly today, where you have so much distributed organizing and people being able to do so much online. Pairing it with real world action, I think that you could, with strategic people placed in the right positions, I think you could do it with tens of thousands of folks, nationwide, even. But yeah, that's always been the thing is you need to organize, you need to start somewhere, you need to run everywhere, even if you're going to lose, because this is what happens in states like mine and all around the country is it becomes a red state because the Democrats don't run candidates. And it becomes a red state because they do that cycle after cycle, verging on generation after generation. And of course, the kids coming up who are turning 18 and going out there hopefully voting have never heard from a Democrat, let alone a leftist, about why they might want to think something differently than their parents and their grandparents thought. In this state, in this district, we've seen a lot of movement to the left, or at least toward Democrats, because of demographic shifts like that. And folks my age and younger. I am a millennial. I know I have a lot of gray hair, but that's genetic. I'm 38.
Oh, okay.
I am. I'm 38 years old. So I'm about as old as you can be and be a millennial.
That's fucking cool, though. By the way, that's like you're like an anime character having like white hair. Young.
Yeah. Actually, I always thought, running for office, given that I am a millennial and I have very obviously millennial politics, left-leaning politics. I've got a lot of Zoomer volunteers as well that are much more radical than I was at their age. But the fact that I have that politics and I am that age, but the fact that I also have a lot of gray hair, I'm not going to lie about my age, but people want to assume that I'm in my 40s or even early 50s or whatever, and they think that confers some kind of authority on me. Then I won't disabuse them of that notion unless they ask me what my age is.
Of course not. I mean, I'm 26. A lot of people think I'm older because of my beard, and because I generally look like shit. And I'll never tell them off. Yeah, absolutely. Like in public or something. Oh God, I remember the first time I went back to visit my high school after graduating, because after that I grew the beard and my hair out, and my chest hair went up to my neckline. And I go in there and they asked me which of them was my kid. And okay, I'll accept the authority you're granting me here. And of course, I did steal one of the children. Obviously,
as you do,
as one does. The kids are getting really radical these days. I actually have a really young audience, which I'm proud of. I like that. There are a lot of people in my chat, like sometimes we'll do age polls, and of course these are never accurate, but there seem
Sure.
to be a lot of under 18s who watch, and these are like 16-year-olds who are quoting like, Luxembourg or something. And it's wild, because I feel like in 30 or 40 years this country is going to be like 60% boomer moderates, and on both sides it's going to be like 2020 neo-Nazi 15-year-olds and anarcho-syndicalist 15-year-olds, and they're just going to be
Yeah.
warring over the center.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. The internet has really opened up the door for political radicalization.
Well, and obviously, as you mentioned, both for good and for ill. But at the same time, some of my most strident volunteers have been kids that are not going to even be able to vote for me in November. I've got 17-year-olds super interested in our campaign, and again, these are folks that haven't been activated by campaigns before. I've had kids come up to me and been like, I can't believe that you're running as a Democrat in this state, and you're speaking in this way. You're a socialist. I am a libertarian socialist. I call myself a libertarian socialist. I'm actually an anarchist. But again, I don't come right out and say that to certain folks. But I believe in direct democracy. I believe in moving in that more egalitarian way. And so they're activated by that because that's their politics, and they don't find many candidates who are espousing that. Certainly not in Indiana for sure. So I'm proud of that. I'm proud of that politics, and I didn't start there. When I was growing up, I was a left-leaning, vote blue no matter who kind of Democrat, like my dad is, and he regularly watches MSNBC. I respect the hell out of my dad. He's done a lot for me, obviously, and a lot in the political work that he's done in his lifetime. But my first vote for president was for Ralph Nader. I lived in Kentucky at the time, and I felt moved by the Nader campaign. I was 18 years old. I tell my dad after the election I voted for Ralph Nader. He's not super happy about that, as many Democrats were not. And so I felt kind of cowed by that. At 18, I didn't really have the intellectual wherewithal to push back against my father, who I still respect to this day. Again, and I'd read a little Marx in high school. We were forced to read Ayn Rand's little novella Anthem, which I think is like a Cliff Notes version of Atlas Shrugged, and I thought it was stupid. And so I picked up the Communist Manifesto, and I read that. I read a bit of Das Kapital, and I'm 18 years old, and I think I know something. And so I go off and I vote for Ralph Nader, hoping maybe he'll get 5%. And then what happened, and I got sort of browbeaten into staying within the Democratic fold. And so I wanted the party to move left. I didn't know how to do that. I just voted for whatever the best candidate I could find in a primary, and then just knuckled up in general.
And then the dog cage match thing happened. It just
then that happened. That happened first.
Keep going and go. Yeah.
That happened first, and that was a problem. And then Bernie Sanders came along and sort of woke me up from a long 15-year slumber. And at this point, I can't turn back. I can't go back to the point before Bernie Sanders came along. And people talk about how Bernie Sanders is not a socialist. Whatever, okay, whatever you want to say about him, he's a social democrat, whatever. A social democrat radicalized millions of people, myself included. I started off one way in 2015, and I ended 2016 as a democratic socialist. And now I'm on this other path of I've gone from left-leaning Dem to Democratic Socialist to Libertarian Socialist, and I'm running for office because this guy ran as a Democrat.
And I think I think it's also a real testament to the frailty of the system, that in spite of America being, I'm going to use a very academic term here, cucked when it comes to workers' rights. I mean, thoroughly cucked. Like this, of the bourgeois democracies, we truly have the bougiest. You know, the Overton window is incredibly narrow in this country, or it was. And the fact that in spite of all of that, in spite of a half century of Red Scare McCarthyist bullshit, stamping down anything even remotely resembling leftism in this country, the assassination of Black Panther Party leaders, everything, in spite of all of that, that Bernie Sanders can still come within a spitting distance of the presidency from the position of an independent initially is insane.
Right.
And I think that speaks a lot. I mean, it really is, you can stomp the flowers, but you can't stop the spring. I think it really does speak to the tenacity of the movement, that it emerges, as long as capitalism exists, so too will socialism, like its shadow. You can't actually stomp it out. It's not possible. It will always rear its head.
Because the capitalists can't solve the contradiction in their own system.
Nope.
Which is that as you accumulate more and more wealth at the top, more and more people at the bottom start wondering why. And so, you get enough of those people wondering why in a militant way, and you're going to end the system. Now, I'm not of the opinion that it's inevitable. I think that it takes work, but, we see this in my generation, and we see it in younger generations who have grown up in nothing but endless war and economic collapse after economic collapse. They see the system for what it is, and they want it to change radically.
Yeah, we just have to make sure they go in the right direction, because there are a lot of people who talk about endless war who then end up going far right because they think it's all being orchestrated by the Jews or whatever. I see a lot of those people online, actually.
Right. So, this is where we need inclusive economic populism, and the word for that is socialism.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need economic nationalism, and we certainly don't need any kind of fusion between the two. The Strasserist Nazbols, sorry, not a thing, not a good thing to be going down that path. We need inclusive, internationalist, intersectional economic populism, a la socialism. That's what we need.
There is a growing number of people who seem to be of the opinion that we could have socialism if we would just drop the identity politics, if we would just stop talking about black people, stop talking about women, stop talking about trans people. And it is the biggest load of horseshit in my life that I have ever heard in my life. Anyone who is willing to fight tooth and nail to secure their workers' rights is not going to abate, because they are being informed that they will also be helping the black people, the black worker, the trans worker, what have you. It really does seem like just a way for a prejudiced or anti-intersectional lefties to kind of pseudo-academically justify leaving those people out in the cold.
Well, I would like an example of when this has worked anywhere, because it hasn't. The only large-scale example of anything like this being tried is the Strasserists. And guess what? Look up Night of the Long Knives. They got killed. Killed.
Whoops. Yeah, no, there's absolutely not. Like, what socialist movement in what country has ever succeeded? Because they're like, you know what? What if we drop the minority bit? Okay, look, we're just going to focus on the white stuff, and everyone will rise for it. This never works. It never works.
No, and again, a large portion of you're leaving out a large portion of the working class. By doing
That's how they
so.
fucked up the labor unions.
Get working class solidarity if you're throwing under the bus the people who are harmed most in the working class, the people who are harmed intersectionally, not just because of their class, but because of their race. or because of their gender identity, or because of their sexual orientation. This is just not a thing that you can
We
do
lost
and
battles
succeed.
back in the day because of this. Because a lot of the
Right.
union leaders back in the 1900 whatevers were racist,
Sure.
because of course, because a lot of them were, and so they wouldn't allow black people into their union. So when they wanted to strike, all the black people were like, "Hey, fuck, I'm not risking my employment for you. I'm not even in your fucking union. You're not getting me shit." And they continued
Right.
working. The strike failed. Historically, this just every time this just doesn't work. So yeah, worker solidarity across the line.
Absolutely.
We've hit the hour mark. I really appreciate you coming to speak with me. It's actually been a lot of fun.
Well, I appreciate you having me, Bausch. Like I said, this is the first major interview that we've done. So, I really appreciate you having me on. Would love to hear from, more folks in your audience. Folks can go again to www.votevick2020. That's VOTE, V as in Victor, ICK 2020.com. And find links to all of our social media. We are on Twitter at VoteVick2020. We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook. We are on Twitch as well, although
Hey.
we haven't done much of that yet. I didn't want to be the old man on Facebook who doesn't know what he's doing there. So I had one of our young Zoomer volunteers clue me into that. We're going to be speaking soon with the good folks at the Surfs on Twitch.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'm friends with Lance.
Yeah, well, Lance is great. I actually, again, because I wasn't on Twitch in real life and in my, outside of this campaign, I'd never even heard of the Surfs, and the show is fantastic. So, I'm looking forward to that. But again, folks, head to the website. We have a thing going on right now where if we can raise $500, we get $500 matching funds from the state party. So, we would love to see folks come on board at any level to donate to our campaign. We have an ActBlue obviously set up there. So come on board, give what you can, and we can put that to good use. We've got a local progressive filmmaker who's willing to do a loss leader video at much lower cost than he'd be willing to do professional, video for us. He's an award-winning documentarian. We would love to have him on board, but it's going to cost money to do that. So we need that video spot, and we need to do more robust digital for our campaign. So 500 people listening right now, give us $1. We've got it. Any amount is appreciated.
Absolutely. Yeah, guys, if you're considering donating to this stream, and I know you are, because I know you always do, consider throwing them over to Vic as well. By the way, did you have one of your Zoomer friends help you with Discord, or did you do that yourself?
No, I did Discord myself, but actually one of my Zoomer friends you to me, because he I think is a subscriber to you, and he was the one who contacted you in the first place. His name is Isaiah Link. Thank you, Isaiah. He was a big help to us in getting our Twitch set up. I actually didn't even know when I set up Twitch, I did a video stream and it disappeared. I thought it was like YouTube; it gets stuck around, but apparently I need to make clips or something. So I'm still not quite on board with how it works, but I will do more of them, I promise. But we will be on the Surfs, and we would love to come back anytime you'd have us.
Absolutely. Thank you very, very much. I hope you enjoy Twitch. It is a very fun platform, I think, if used properly. If only I could spend more time there. I hope you have a wonderful day. Of course, when we post the video, we'll put all the links in the description, so everything will be nicely organized. And once again, thank you very, very much for coming on. I wish you the best of luck in your upcoming primary, or not primary, sorry, in the upcoming election. And I hope it goes well for you.
Yeah, and again, I am the nominee, so folks are donating to someone who can be elected in November.
You're up against the incumbent Republican.
I am, absolutely.
The guy who wore the businessman. So the age-old battle continues.
He throws a lot of money around in the district, but he hasn't done a lot for the district. We will, and we can win. So come on board our campaign. Thank you so much for having me, Dash.
Godspeed, man. Have a good one.
You too.